Welcome back, eReads podcast listeners. It is your host, Liz. I hope you're doing well. If this is your first time here, this is my podcast where I talk about books, authorship, and all the different parts of the creative process. Today, this episode, I have Julie to talk about decluttering. Not just your physical space, but also your mental space and how that can help in your writing pursuits. So if you are ready to jump in, settle in, and we'll jump right into the episode. Julie, I am so excited to have you and talk about your multiple books. So how are you today?
I'm outstanding. How are you?
I'm good. The weather's shining, so that's always a good day.
Absolutely. We're going to be 80s here today and then drop 30 degrees in a couple days. You notice?
Yes.
Rant, rant, rant.
But, to welcome you, I like to start with what I call as a bookish question. So question about books and something easy and light to welcome you. And so the question I thought of is, what drink matches your book? So if you had to describe your book as a drink, what would you say it's like?
What an outstanding question. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm glad this just popped in my head because I'm like, oh my gosh, drink a smoothie. And I'll tell you why,
Ooh.
because smoothies are refreshing, but most of the time, if we do it correctly, they're really nutrient based. And so
Mm-hmm.
my books give you nutrients. They support you in changing your life, creating the life that you desire, and it tastes good, right? I think that sometimes, if I don't ever put mustard greens in smoothies. I learned the hard way once when that happened. But, sometimes might have a little bit of bitterness because self-reflection can be challenging, but
Right.
ultimately it's good for us like a smoothie.
Interesting. I love that. And I like how you said it's nourishing, it's good for you. It might be a little bit bitter because I don't think we think of decluttering as having a lot of good parts to it, even though it feels good after, but there really are a lot of good things to decluttering.
Absolutely. What I tell people is, well, a couple things. One, what is clutter costing you? It could be
Yeah.
arguing with a roommate or a spouse, time, money, peace of mind. The older
Yeah.
I get, you can't put a price tag on peace of mind. And the other thing I like people to think about is, we think, oh, I've got a messy desk. And I want you to expand your definition and thinking of clutter. Not only is it a messy desk, it might be a roadblock to a promotion. It
Mhm.
might be preventing you, as we talk about books, from writing the next great American book. Or if you have an overstuffed closet, it can be preventing a relationship from blooming. So don't see it in that tight little corner. Expand your viewpoint.
Absolutely, because I definitely notice if I'm like, oh, I'm gonna sit down and write, but there's laundry over there or the dishes, it will distract my focus. And once I've taken care of that, oh, I'm fine. So I am here for all the different ways that we can be intentional about declutter.
I want to just give a quick tip because this is about books and creative people. One of my favorite suggestions is if you've worked in an office space, you know how you have those mail slots. And so the assistant will put your mail, my mail, and everyone we have labels. You can get smaller versions of those and you can put bits and pieces of paper. So if you are working on multiple creative
Mhm.
projects or multiple books, keep your ideas organized that way. I mean, I'm not all digital. I know that some people are. I'm not there yet. But that is just if you keep physical notes or ideas, then that's a really easy solution because creative people often are afraid, oh no, if you move my clutter, then my creativity is going to go out the window. And that's not true. And that's a simple solution to keep all your creativity going that's just tidied up a bit.
I love that. So before you give us more wonderful tips, please tell us more. How did this journey start? Did you always know you wanted to write about this? What's your journey like?
Well, when I was 6, I wanted to be an archaeologist and bring my mom
Really?
old bones, but I always wanted to write. And so what happened, I'm a podcaster like you. I'm going to be closing it up at this year though. After a decade, I'm like, it's time to take
Congrats.
a
That's a
break.
long
Thank you.
time.
It is a long time. So I thought I'm going to turn my podcast into books. And so that's how I did with one. And then because of my personal growth work, I'm like, you know what's best for you. I don't know what's best for you, but I can support you in figuring that out. So I created the journal prompt series for people to access their own wisdom. And one thing that I did differently that I haven't seen in other books is I asked the question and, for you to write. And then on the side, I have a little line with a lotus at the bottom. And once you've written it, I want you to take out what's most significant
Mm.
in what you wrote, and especially if we're kind of doing free writing and not concentrating too hard. And for people that have clutter, they're overwhelmed. So this extra step allows them, okay, let me go back and review what I've written. What's most important here? And so that's something that I believe is really important. And then people are like, I just need a quick thing. So I'm like, all right, well, here's a 21-day challenge to get you started. And I'm working on an end of life organizing book now because I'm something
Wow.
that I'm very passionate about. And I think we need to start having these conversations and thinking about it.
Absolutely. Before I touch on that, because I do think that is like so valuable. I love how you talked about, making it so that the person gets to go on this exploration, because I think so often we try and copy word for word or someone else's life, and then we're really surprised when it didn't work. And it's like, we're not that person. You have to unlock your thing. So I so appreciate that intentionality about helping people explore what works for them.
Yeah, you can look the same, act the same, have similar backgrounds. You're still on a different journey. It's
Yeah.
all individual.
Mhm. Absolutely. And if there's anything more, can you share about, the end of life organizer? I think that is so valuable because we often that's a very individual journey, and we don't know how to go on it, and we don't also want to leave a lot of loose ends for our loved ones. And so I think that's really valuable.
It's a gift to give your loved ones peace of mind. I started this because a couple years ago, my dad, probably been 5 years now, said, I want you to meet with my accountant, my attorney. My dad's not like super rich, but he's like, I want all this figured out.
Mhm.
And so gave us peace of mind. Now I was
Mhm.
upset. Now, the ironic thing was, we're like, oh, my dad's going to die first. Well, my mom unfortunately died,
Mm.
about 18 months ago. And after she died, I'm like, okay, well, and he's like, well, your mom didn't plan, I did. Your mom didn't want to have these conversations. So
Right.
the last thing we wanted to talk about when grieving was, well, and dad's like, well, we did have a conversation about cremation. All right, well, let's create mom then. But when you're grieving, it's very hard to make those decisions. And I know, like, going through my mother's stuff, I've had
Right.
the luxury of time, but my dad's like, I'm like, I'm grieving. I don't want to. And my mom was a painter. And so I tell
Mm.
the story the first time I went through, my husband came and he's like, honey, we don't have enough walls for all of her paintings. And so I was like, okay, so I'll go through them again. But it's a process,
Right.
especially when you're grieving. And things like, I'm an animal person. We have cats. I can't tell you how many times I read the pet is thrown out, which is
Yeah.
just awful, or thrown to the shelter, or there are no options, especially if you go to into end of life care. Not many facilities allow you to bring animals. It's the same if you have kids. What's going to happen? Who do you want raising them with their values? And the other thing I want to emphasize is, it's not about being rich. It's not about your wealth. What values are important to you? What do you want your loved ones? This is how I tried to live my life. This is the advice I'd like to share. Or if
Mhm.
there's a family heirloom that has a really great story. I had a great, great, great someone, and the house burned down, and he picked a little clock mantle. Okay, well, why did you do that? Why was this little clock? It wasn't something valuable. Why was that important to you? So those are the types of things I, hope people think about and begin to plan for.
Oh, I love that, and it's so thoughtful. And it also makes me think, you talked about, in the grieving process, and you don't want there's just you want to be in that lane and not doing the other things. But that also makes me think about the creative, right? When you are in the creative space, there's other things that you don't want to take you from that. And so, can you share a little bit more about how have you seen creatives kind of use this practice of decluttering? What has that process been like?
Well, so for me personally,
Sure, yes.
I would say for me, like, I've always been kind of uptight, and we've gone through a couple rounds of downsizing. But what separates me is, I talk about decluttering your life. And my definition of clutter is this, and I will swing back to your point, I promise, is clutters anything that prevents you from creating the life you choose, deserve, and desire. So
Okay.
from a creative standpoint, mental were my blocks, mental clutter. Oh, you're not good enough to be a writer
Right.
because someone told you, in junior high that you couldn't write. Okay, well, it's time to put that to rest and ignore those outside voices that aren't my soul talking. And so for me, it was more of a mental part, and then my part of my spiritual journey. I believe, you're responsible to give back and to leave this earth better than when you came in. And so when you shine your light, that supports everyone else because they can say, she did it, then I can do it. And oh, she shared this rough part of her life and look where she is now, right? That's what gets me excited and doing that. What if we were in a world where everyone was creative and sharing their passions? It would look a lot different
Yeah.
than today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. And I like how you said, clearing out, the clutter, or, when you think about, and so you can hear your soul talking. And I think that's important because there's so many things that can kind of try and distract you from
Mhm.
what is truly on the inside trying to peek out. Um,
Yes.
whether that is physically your room from all the different clutter in there or just the inside of you. So I think that's a beautiful connection.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, again, to me, it's so important to show people. And also, I would say the other thing is that we had talked about a moment ago that you have the answers within. I
Yeah.
see my job when I work with people as supporting them. And so, not to their like you said, distractions, people saying, "This is" I see it with decluttering and organizing, "This is the way to do it." Well, maybe, but maybe not for a lot of people, and to not get
Hmm.
stuck like, you have to do that this one way, because that drives me absolutely insane when people say, "This is how it needs to be done."
Hmm.
And, I had another point that just went through my brain, but maybe it will come back, about, clutter. Oh, and I wanna say one other thing. It's also not about perfection. We were talking before we
Mm.
started, I'm like, "This is my cleaning day. I've already dusted and vacuumed, and I'm gonna go sort." I like to tidy up at the end of the week. I've had a crazy week. So all my papers, I'm like, "Let's block this because 'cause we've got a pile here I'm gonna move because 'cause I'm gonna get to it today." So it's not about perfection. It is about progress. And so don't
Mm.
feel like you are going to overnight get everything decluttered. I'm a
Right.
work in progress, right? I have clutter and still have emotional clutter, mental. I'm still working on that, but I work at it.
I love that. And can you please share a little bit because you have this broken down to so many different areas. Can you share some? Can you share some maybe of I don't want to say favorites because our books become almost like our babies, but
Right? Yes.
but share some of the different areas that you have.
Well, so I have the one book, Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out, which is really going into nitty gritty details and tells you take action steps at the end of each. But we're talking about physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And I
Hmm.
threw a bonus energetic clutter because I know that's weird for some people, but everything's energy, whether you believe
Hmm.
that from a spiritual or physics perspective. And I want people to start becoming aware of that because it's like I was in the South for a long time and they say, bless his heart. And it took me a while to realize, oh, that's not a compliment. That's an insult. Like, I didn't realize that. I'm like, ooh, right? So you might be talking nice like this, but the underlying vibe is complete opposite. So everything is energy. So I would say, so I have that book, and then I have the 21-day challenge that I mentioned really briefly, which is, again, that's bam, bam, 21 days. We're going to become aware, and then we're going to take action and set goals moving forward. And then I have 12 journal prompts, which again, like at the end, I give you a take action plan. I don't want to leave you just like, I've done all this work, now what? So I break down how to do that. But like relationships is
Mm.
probably a favorite because our relationships are so important to our lives. And I can't tell you how many times I myself and other people like, oh, they don't support my dreams. They don't believe in me. Man, that can really be a roadblock. Holiday is also a favorite one because the holidays tend to have this what I call the just becauses. Just
Mm.
because I've always done it, I need to continue. No, you really don't.
Right.
Right. And empowering yourself. And people are like, oh, the holidays. And for a lot of people, it's not a happy time.
Right.
So I'm passionate about that. Financial, again, I'm big into that. Like if you're in debt, what are you going to do? That's a constant stress for you. If you haven't planned for retirement, if you haven't thought these things through, health, I'm on a journey. I've been exercising. I'm down 25 pounds. I'm at my
Yay.
halfway point. Mental, physical, spiritual, energetic. I think I've covered everything, but 12 different, and then I have a compilation if you're like, I want to do a little bit of this and that. But
Nice.
uh, I want people to start exploring those areas and understanding how everything's related.
Yeah.
So, if you clear your desk up, that's going to help your mental clutter. If you work on emotional clutter, that's going to help your finances because you're not like, oh, I need to have this. I'm jealous. It's so and so, right? And seeing how it's all interconnected.
Absolutely. Like it makes me think of like writer's block or like burnout, right? Like that isn't because you can't figure out your project. Like there is something that is taking up too much energy. So you don't have enough to put into your project. And so like if you take care of this area, whether again it's the emotional, your relationships, whatever that is, just your health, right? It can unlock that. And I think that's why so many people are like, oh yeah, when I got up from the desk and I went outside, I was able to
Yes.
figure it out. Well, yeah,
Right.
because you had too much clutter.
Right, exactly. The bathtub is my place for inspiration. If it's because
Nice.
I'm relaxed and
Mm-hmm.
then ideas pop into it. But yeah, I mean, and it's getting that perspective. And like I mentioned relationships a moment ago, you might not be aware if someone is saying, you suck, you can't write. Like that is taking its toll, whether or not you realize that. Now, if
Right.
you have 99% of the cheerleaders around, it's a lot easier to let that 1% go and be like jealous or whatever is going on with them, and putting that voice and person to rest and having a boundary and saying, you know what? No, no, I'm not going to allow you. Thanks. Okay. Bye.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that too is important because there's always this conversation of like, what do you do with negative comments? What do you do with negative reviews? Well, making sure that you have that support team because when you have more of that positivity, it's easier to filter out all those different negative voices and things. So, absolutely, another great tip.
I want to share. You're a podcaster. Like I've had negative comments about my podcast. YouTube's my favorite. That's where I've gotten the nastiest comments. So one time someone's like, I hate her voice. And
Mm.
so I wrote back and I said, isn't it great where we live in America where you can choose who you want to listen to? Right?
Love
There
it.
are multitudes because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, you hate my voice? Oh, well." And then someone said my favorite reason was, "Your, face scares a beep out of me." And I was like, "I'm so grateful it doesn't my husband," right? Like, I'm gonna have fun with this and, not let those keyboard warriors bring me down. But, I believe a lot of us that are writers and creatives are very sensitive people, right? We just pick up on things perhaps that other people don't. And so making sure that we don't dull that sensitivity because of the cruel comments that are out there.
I love that. Don't dull your creativity because of the negativity out there. Absolutely. I think that's such valuable advice because sometimes that can be stunting, but like turning away from that. Love that.
Yeah.
Julie, what are some practical tips if people are just like, yeah, I don't know where to start or like I am really blocked? What are some tips that, have been helpful that you can give us?
Well, I want to start with where to start because I think that's a great,
Yes.
especially, when we have clutter, we tend to be overwhelmed.
Right.
So, what I would say to you is there something driving you crazy, right? You're like, oh my gosh, every time I walk by my bookcase, it drives me nuts because it needs to be organized. Then start there. Or if you have an impending deadline and you're saying, okay, I was going to have six chapters done by 3 months from now and it's not happening, then I need to get my desk space organized. Or
Mhm.
if you have, say, you're getting cabinets installed in the kitchen and they're coming on May 30th or whatever. Okay, well, then that's a deadline to get the kitchen decluttered and organized.
Mhm.
So, I'm not paying them money to move all that. Or, if there's something like the doctor said, hey, you know what, you got to lose weight and get in better shape. Okay, then I'll clean up the kitchen so I'm eating healthier meals. So, those are some kind of things I would say for where to begin. And remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to declutter in a day. So, be gentle with yourself. But
Mhm.
do encourage people, write it down.
Mhm.
I wanna know, when are you gonna work on this? Because
Mhm.
someday never comes, and if we don't write it down, whether it's in our planner or on our app, it tends not to get done,
Mhm.
right? So that's very important. If you need, get support, obviously. I think it's also to remind yourself, we talked about it earlier, what is clutter costing you? And
Right.
then the flip side of that, what are you gonna gain when you declutter?
Yeah.
Right? What are things that you're like, "Oh, I'm not gonna fight with my spouse. I'm gonna finally get those 6 chapters written," right? My creativity is gonna get back in shape. It's gonna start to blossom again. So figuring out what is going to motivate you. And, I wanna point out that 10 minutes a day is just over 60 hours a week and a year. You can get a lot done in 60 hours a week. I mean, if you're just like, Julie, I can't devote, okay, well, then you give me 10 minutes a day. So in a year, you've
Mm-hmm.
seen a difference,
Oh,
right?
I
No
love
excuses. And the other thing people say to me, I don't have time to declutter. And I always say, how much time are you spending on social media? How much time are you spending watching TV? Although I'm watching Succession right now. Oh my gosh.
that.
I'm like Sunday night, I'm like, we are in front of the TV. But that's not how I spend all my time. So just be
Right.
really aware, like, where are you spending your time? And then say, okay, I'm gonna write this down and do it and commit to it.
Mm. And that's a great practice for putting yourself first, right?
Yes.
Again, like we're always doing something, or sometimes we could be doing something for others. And then that's kind of how we get to the, whether again, that's a mental
Mhm.
or a physical clutter. But like when you reframe that and you put yourself first and you give it that 10 minutes a day, I think that can change so much.
Absolutely. And what I found when people start those 10 minutes and they start to see that difference, they're like, oh, I can go beyond 10 minutes
Yeah.
today, right? I'm going
Hmm.
to go a little further. And then again, everything changes. So your space feels differently. You're thinking more clearly. You feel happier. That's just more motivation to continue.
Absolutely. Julie, before I ask you about how can folks connect with you, what are any tips or strategies for mental clutter? What if someone's like, okay, like my space is organized, but my mind is cluttered? Any support for them?
Absolutely. Well, I would say come up with some type of mindfulness practice,
Mm.
whether it's meditation. Like I have a friend, he loves classical music. So when he sits down to listen to classical music, that just calms him. I'm a big fan of walking. You mentioned it earlier, getting out in nature.
Yeah.
I think that's important and becoming present. We can't change the past. I've tried really hard on multiple times. The
Right.
past, I can't change it. And the future's written in pencil. We don't, I mean, there's so many factors and things out of our control, right? That we can't. So when you become present, you say, oh my gosh, I'm worried about my deadline for my book. Okay, well, as I'm spending time and worrying, okay, let me
Hmm.
become present. Okay, then I can sit down and write 100 words in the present moment instead of being in the future and things aren't happening. So those are some things that I would suggest for releasing mental clutter. And again, I also believe physical exercise and doing that helps just dump that. And I like to do a brain dump. Sometimes I'll just write, whatever is going on and causing me stress. Sometimes it is just doing that. And the other thing I found is because I can't control other people, I need to find ways to get closure. So I have a
Mm.
little burning bowl and we'll do ceremonies and write that letter and swear and do whatever I need to do, burn it, watch it burn up, and then release it.
Love that. I also love, the future is written in pencil because sometimes I might act like it's written in stone already.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
absolutely, that right there is amazing.
Well, good. Hopefully that'll people. And remember, you're a work in progress. And the other thing I want to say is I say this a lot is you are good enough, you are worthy, and you are loved no matter what. I don't care what your past is, what you've done. You are a spiritual being in a human body, and no matter what's happened, you can always start again. And don't forget that. And I know some people listening are probably struggling, don't have that support network. Find your tribe, find the people that work with you and are good and get you. They're out there.
Julie, thank you so much for reminding us clutter is just not just what we see in front of our eyes, but sometimes it's internal. Please share, how can folks connect with you? How can they find your books?
Thank you so much. So if they go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com, I've got a shop there, everything you can buy. I also have affirmations and
Nice.
classes. And then all my books are on Amazon, Google Play. There are ebooks as well too. So they should be able to find me anywhere. And if not, holler at me and I will get you a book.
Lovely. And if y'all missed any of that, it will be in the episode show notes. So please check out there. Julie, any last words in regards to, well, which book should we pick up first, right? So if someone's just like, I don't know where to start, where would you recommend they start?
I would recommend, we've talked about mental clutter, that you close your eyes, you sit there quietly, and you let your soul, where do I want to begin?
Yeah.
What book am I most drawn to? And you trust that intuitive response
Oh, I
because
love
it's
that.
there to serve you.
I love that. And any final words for um anyone out there that maybe is scared to declutter, you mentioned like, if we clear off the papers, my creativity is going to go. Like, any last words for them?
Yeah, I've talked a lot about this. The healing journey is so important, and amazing things can come out when you're decluttering. Painful things can come out when you're decluttering. But I promise you this, the time and energy that you are devoting to holding on to any pain, to any hurts, is far harder than going through the healing journey and releasing that. And the other
Mm.
side might seem like it's miles away, but it's really easy to put your feet through the fire instead of holding back and being afraid not to touch upon maybe things that you aren't ready to deal with. And in time you will be, but take that first step. Believe in yourself.
I love that, and a great place to end. And, Julie, my final question for you is, I like to end with what could be used as a writing prompt. It could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be anything. And this is something for us to use in our creative process, whatever way we express creativity, dance, art, whatever. So if you had to leave us with a prompt, what would it be?
What do I need to declutter in my life right now in this present moment?
I'm writing that down. What do I need to declutter in this present moment? It's got me thinking about putting a character in that situation and seeing how they go and how they walk through that. So I think I'm going to have fun with this prompt. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for having me, and thank you for sharing your gifts with the world and supporting people through the podcast.
Lovely. Y'all have a great rest of your day. And thank you, Julie.
Thank you.